Have you ever given your whole heart to your family only to be treated like you are nothing? Have you ever saved for years, denying yourself every little comfort, just so the people you love could have a memory to cherish, only to find out you were never part of their plan? My name is Joyce Miller. I'm a grandmother in my late 60s, and if you saw me today, you might think I'm just another old woman living quietly in a small house. But what happened to me still burns in my chest like a fresh wound. I wasn't chasing riches or luxury. All I wanted was to share a dream with my son Michael, his wife Alicia, and my two sweet grandchildren, Leo and Lily. I thought that by giving them this gift, they would feel my love in a way words could never express. I saved for years to take them to Paris, the trip of a lifetime. I worked until my fingers ached. I skipped small joys. I sacrificed quietly, because I believed that family meant sacrifice. But when the day came, when I stood with my suitcase packed and my heart full of hope, I found myself left behind. Abandoned. Forgotten. Betrayed by the very people I thought would never hurt me. And as they wandered the streets of Paris without me, they learned something they will never forget. Betrayal always comes with a price. Before I tell you the rest of this story, let me pause for a moment, because I know many of you watching are mothers, grandmothers, fathers, and even young people carrying burdens of your own. My dear, I want to pray over you. May your body stay strong through the aches and tiredness of age. May your heart remain gentle, even when life has hardened those around you. If you are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, and you sometimes feel forgotten, I pray that today you remember. You are still needed, you are still loved, and your story is not finished. And for the younger ones listening, may you never turn your back on the hands that raised you, because the blessing of a parent or grandparent is worth more than all the treasures of this world. I speak these words with sincerity because I have lived the pain of being pushed aside, and I would never want anyone else to feel the sting of betrayal I felt on that day. Now, before we continue, I would love for you to join our family here on this channel. Please take a second to subscribe, because every story I share carries a lesson, born from the heart of a grandmother. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to lift you up in my prayers by name, wherever you are in the world. Now, let me take you back to the moment I thought I was giving my family the greatest gift of their lives, but instead, I was walking straight into heartbreak. I've lived in the same little house in Larkspur Heights for over 40 years. It's nothing fancy, just a porch with 2 old rocking chairs and a garden that needs more tending than my back can handle. I used to sit out there with my husband, Arthur, until the day God called him home. Since then, the quiet has been heavier than I could ever put into words. But even in the silence, I still had a reason to keep going. My son Michael, his wife Alicia, and my grandchildren, Leo and Lily, became my joy. Every Sunday they would come over. I'd cook a roast or a pot of stew, and the laughter of those children would fill the rooms that once felt so empty. Those were the happiest hours of my week, and I cherished every second. It was during those quiet nights, after the dishes were washed and the house was empty again, that I started dreaming of giving them something special. Not just another dinner, not just another gift wrapped in paper. I wanted to give them a memory that would last a lifetime. Arthur had once talked about Paris, how he wished we could have gone while we were still young enough to wander those cobblestone streets hand in hand. We never made it, but I thought, why not make that dream come true for the family he left behind? Why not let the children see the Eiffel Tower sparkle, or take them on a riverboat down the Seine? That dream took root in my heart, and it became my mission. Not for me, but for them. I spent years quietly working toward that dream. Every extra dollar went into a little account I called my Paris fund. When my old coat tore, I stitched it instead of buying a new one. When my friends invited me out for lunch, I told them I'd already eaten, then made myself tea at home. My hands, stiff from age, knit scarf after scarf, which I sold online. Each one felt like a brick being laid on the road to Paris. I didn't tell anyone at first. I wanted it to be a surprise. And when the day finally came, when I opened my bank statement and saw enough for flights, an apartment, and even a few little luxuries, I felt like Arthur himself was smiling down at me. At Sunday dinner, I gathered them all around the table. With trembling hands, I pulled out the folder that held the tickets and itinerary. "We're going to Paris," I said, my voice breaking with joy. Their gasps, their smiles, their laughter. It was everything I had hoped for. I believed, in that moment, that the years of sacrifice had been worth it. But sometimes, smiles hide shadows. And sometimes, the people you love most can wound you in ways no stranger ever could. I didn't know it then, but when the day of departure came, I wouldn't be sitting on that airplane. I would be standing alone on a porch, suitcase in hand, with a heart full of betrayal. After Arthur passed, my house turned into a place filled with silence. I would wake up and reach across the bed, expecting to find him there, only to feel the cold sheets. Breakfast was the hardest. He used to hum while buttering his toast, and now all I could hear was the ticking of the kitchen clock. I tried to keep busy. I tended the garden until my back ached, sorted through old photos, even joined a bridge club. But no matter what I did, the loneliness followed me. The one thing that kept me from being swallowed by it completely was my family. My son Michael, his wife Alicia, and my 2 grandchildren, Leo and Lily. Every Sunday, without fail, they would come over. I'd cook roast chicken or stew, and we'd gather around the dining table. The children's laughter filled the rooms like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Michael would talk about work, Alicia about the children's schools, and I would just sit there, watching, my heart swelling with gratitude. For those few hours, I wasn't just a widow in a quiet house. I was a mother and grandmother with purpose. I lived for those Sundays. But when the door closed and the sound of their car faded down the street, the silence crept back in. It wrapped around me heavier than ever, and I would whisper to myself, "At least I'll see them again next week." Those weekly visits became my lifeline, and I wanted more. I wanted something bigger, something that would bring us closer together, something none of us would ever forget. That's when the idea of Paris began to take root. The idea of Paris came to me one evening when I was sorting through Arthur's old desk. Tucked between some papers, I found a brochure for a European river cruise. He had always talked about seeing Europe one day, but work, bills, and responsibilities kept pushing that dream further and further away. Life ran out before we ever had the chance. I stared at that brochure for a long time, and then a thought came over me. What if I could still give our family a piece of that dream? Not a cruise, no, that was far beyond my means. But Paris? Maybe. Paris could be possible. So I opened a small savings account and called it my Paris Fund. From that day on, every extra dollar went there. If my coat tore, I patched it instead of replacing it. When my friends went out for lunch, I made myself tea at home. My hands, stiff and swollen from age, learned to knit scarf after scarf. I sold them online one by one. The money came in slowly, but every sale felt like another step closer to the Eiffel Tower. I didn't tell Michael or Alicia. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to see their faces when I finally said, "We're going to Paris." That dream kept me moving. Each month, as I watched the balance grow, I felt Arthur close to me, as if he were cheering me on from above. Years passed like this, saving, sacrificing, working in silence. Some nights I fell asleep with aching fingers, but my heart was full, because I was building something beautiful for the people I loved most. Have you ever sacrificed for years, only to wonder if your loved ones truly valued it? That question haunted me sometimes, but I pushed it aside. I believed my love would be enough. The day finally came when I checked my bank statement and saw the number I'd been waiting for. I had enough. Enough for the flights, enough for a small apartment in Paris, and enough for us to enjoy 2 whole weeks together in the city Arthur had dreamed of. I remember my hands trembling as I planned the perfect Sunday dinner. I roasted a chicken the way Arthur loved it, with garlic and rosemary, and baked an apple pie from scratch. I wanted everything to feel like a celebration, even before they knew why. When dessert was finished, I pushed my chair back and stood up, holding a folder I'd kept hidden for years. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "I have a surprise," I said, my voice shaking. Michael looked puzzled. Alicia tilted her head, and the children's eyes lit up with curiosity. I opened the folder and spread the papers across the table. "We're going to Paris," I said, smiling through tears. The reaction was instant. Alicia gasped and covered her mouth. Leo and Lily squealed, bouncing in their seats. Even Michael's eyes glistened for a moment before he smiled wide. "Mom, are you serious?" he asked, and I nodded, barely able to speak. I thought that moment would live in my heart forever. I thought I had given them something that would bind us together in joy. Their excitement seemed real. Their gratitude seemed genuine. But sometimes excitement can be a mask. Sometimes smiles are only for show. Do you know someone who takes but never gives back? At that table, I didn't recognize it yet, but that was exactly the kind of love I was surrounded by. The months that followed were filled with planning. At least, that's how it seemed at first. Michael offered to help book the flights. Alicia said she would look into apartments near Montmartre. The children were thrilled, constantly asking me how to say simple words in French. They'd giggle when I answered with my little phrasebook. "Grandma, how do you say I'm hungry?" Lily asked once, and I proudly replied, "J Fame." They clapped their hands as if I were the cleverest woman in the world. For a while, it felt perfect. I carried that phrasebook everywhere. I'd sit in bed at night practicing bonjour and merci, picturing the four of us walking together through Parisian streets. It gave me such joy, knowing I was giving my family something unforgettable. But as the departure date drew closer, something shifted. I started noticing unanswered calls. Texts that went hours without replies. Whenever I asked Michael about flight details, he'd brush it off with a vague, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it covered." Alicia, too, seemed distant. When I showed her the elegant dress I bought for our special dinner in Paris, she gave me a tight smile and said softly, "It's lovely, Joyce." Her tone lingered with me long after she left that night. It didn't sound like excitement. It sounded like an obligation. I told myself they were just stressed with preparations. A trip like this was a big deal after all. But deep down, I felt a little ache in my chest, an uneasiness I couldn't quite name. The days leading up to our departure should have been filled with nothing but joy, but instead, there were moments that left me unsettled. Michael grew more distant, often brushing off my questions with a quick, "Don't worry, Mom, it's all handled." Alicia stopped returning my calls as quickly as she used to. I told myself it was just last-minute stress. Families get busy when they're preparing for a big trip, right? But 3 nights before our flight, Michael showed up at my house. He smiled, but it was a nervous sort of smile. "Mom, I think it'll be easier if I take your passport and flight documents now," he said. "That way, I'll have everything in one place for the airport." I hesitated for a second, but I didn't want him to think I didn't trust him. So I handed over the travel folder I'd spent weeks putting together, my passport, copies of the bookings, even the itinerary I typed myself. As I passed it to him, his eyes flickered away, just for a moment, before he quickly tucked the folder into his bag. "Thanks, Mom," he said, already halfway out the door. "I've got to run, still lots to pack." That small flicker in his eyes should have told me everything, but I silenced the thought. I wanted so badly to believe in the good of my own son. The night before the trip, I hardly slept. I kept picturing the moment we would land in Paris. The children's laughter as they looked out the airplane window, Alicia taking photos, Michael smiling proudly. My suitcase was already packed and standing by the door. The dress I bought for our special Paris dinner hung neatly in the closet. My heart felt like it was fluttering inside my chest. At 4 a.m., my alarm went off. I leapt out of bed with more energy than I had felt in years. I got dressed, fixed my hair, and made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window, my suitcase beside me, waiting for Michael to pull into the driveway. He promised he would pick me up at 5:30 sharp so we could reach the airport in time for our 8 a.m. flight. But 5:30 came and went. No car. No phone call. No text message. By 5:45, my excitement had turned into worry. I dialed Michael's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried Alicia. The same. My hands trembled as I dialed their landline, but the ringing echoed in my ear without an answer. By 6 o'clock, I felt the dread settle in my stomach. I told myself it had to be traffic, or maybe the children were moving slowly that morning. I clung to hope as I tried calling again and again, each time greeted by silence. By 6:30, with panic rising in my throat, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I grabbed my purse, called a cab, and gave the driver Michael's address. My voice cracked as I spoke, but he didn't ask questions. The ride across town felt endless. My heart raced the entire way, praying I would see Michael's car still parked in the driveway, that this was all just a misunderstanding. But when we pulled up, my worst fear began to take shape. The house was dark. No lights, no movement. I rang the doorbell once, twice, then pressed it hard, holding it down until the chime echoed again and again. Nothing. That's when I noticed the garage door. I walked over and peered through the small window. The space was empty. Michael's car was gone. My chest tightened. I stumbled back toward the porch. And that's when I saw it, a white envelope taped to the front door, my name written across it in Michael's handwriting. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside were just 2 short sentences. "Mom, so sorry. We just couldn't wait any longer. We'll send you postcards." The words cut through me like a knife. My vision blurred. The paper slipped from my hand, and I stood frozen, unable to breathe. I don't know how long I stood there on that porch, the morning sun rising behind me, the envelope crumpled in my hand. The cab driver, a kind man named Marco, eventually stepped out of the car. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked softly. I couldn't answer. My throat burned, and a single sob escaped before I covered my mouth. He looked at the suitcase by my feet, then at the empty garage, and I think he understood. Without a word, he gently guided me back to the taxi and loaded my bag. The ride home felt like a blur. The streets of Boston passed by in streaks of color, but I didn't see them. I sat with my hands trembling in my lap, staring at nothing. My heart had never felt so heavy. When I walked back into my house, the silence was deafening. My suitcase sat there by the door, mocking me. I thought of the years I had spent saving, knitting until my fingers ached, patching my clothes instead of buying new ones, saying no to little joys so I could give my family this dream. And for what? For them to walk onto a plane without me, leaving me behind like I was nothing. I went to the kitchen and sat at the table where I had announced the trip months earlier. I could still hear their laughter from that night, the children's squeals, Michael's voice saying, "Mom, are you serious?" I had thought those words were filled with love. Now I realized they were nothing more than convenience. Shame washed over me. I couldn't tell anyone. How could I? How could I admit that my own family, the ones I had given everything to, had abandoned me? The thought of my friends from Bridge Club asking, "How was Paris?" made me sick. I imagined their pitying looks, their whispers when my back was turned. The hours dragged on. I didn't eat. I didn't answer the phone. The house felt colder than ever. Every creak of the floor, every tick of the clock pressed on me until I thought I would suffocate under the weight of it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears soaking my pillow. The silence that used to be my quiet companion now screamed at me, reminding me of my betrayal. My Paris dream was gone. My family was gone. And all I was left with was a hollow ache that seemed too big to survive. If you're listening to me right now, let me ask you something. How would you feel if your family did this to you? Would your heart ever forgive them? Could you ever look at them the same way again? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your voices, because no one should carry pain like this alone. The days after that morning blended together into something I can barely describe. I stopped answering the phone. Friends from church and my bridge group left messages, worried because I hadn't shown up. I just let the phone ring. I couldn't bear the thought of explaining. How could I tell anyone that my own son, the boy I raised, had left me standing on a porch while he went on a dream trip without me? Food lost its taste. I'd make a cup of tea, then let it grow cold. I would turn on the television just for the noise, but I never saw what was playing. The house felt colder, emptier than it ever had before. Every time I walked past my packed suitcase, a wave of shame washed over me. I had been ready for Paris, ready to give them everything. And instead, I was left with nothing but silence. I spent hours sitting in my armchair, staring at the photo albums on the shelf. One evening, I finally gave in and opened them. I flipped through pictures of Michael as a little boy, smiling in his football uniform, blowing out birthday candles, hugging Arthur with his tiny arms. My hands trembled as I turned the pages, and then, tucked between 2 photographs, a folded piece of paper fell to the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and unfolded it. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was Arthur's, my late husband's steady hand, still familiar after all these years. The note was short. My dearest Joyce, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. There's something I want you to know. Look at the back of our favorite ocean painting. You'll find what you're looking for. I stared at those words, unsure what to think. My heart pounded as I walked to the living room. On the wall hung that small watercolor of the sea, the one we had bought decades ago in Cape Cod. My hands trembled as I lifted it down. Turning it over, I found a small envelope taped neatly to the back. Inside was a letter, written in Arthur's unmistakable handwriting. As I read, my knees nearly gave out. Arthur confessed that he hadn't just been an engineer, as I always thought. For years, he had secretly invested and built a fortune, money that he placed in a trust under my name. The letter even included account details and instructions for how to access it. I sat there shaking, hardly able to breathe. All this time, while I was knitting scarves to save pennies, while I was patching old coats instead of buying new ones, there had been a fortune waiting for me. The shock was almost too much to process. My grief over Michael's betrayal still weighed heavily, but suddenly, another feeling began to rise inside me, something I hadn't felt in weeks. Energy. Possibility. The letters shook me to my core. I sat there with Arthur's words spread across my lap, reading them again and again, as if my eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. My husband, gone all these years, had left me not just with memories, but with the means to start over. The tears I cried that night were different. Not the broken sobs of betrayal, but a mix of grief, love, and a strange new strength. The very next morning, I called the bank. My hands shook as I gave the code Arthur had written. The voice on the other end confirmed it. The account was real. The funds were mine. For the first time in weeks, I stood up straighter. The silence in my house felt a little less suffocating. I ate a proper breakfast, got dressed, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my hair was unkempt, but something about the woman staring back at me looked alive again. I realized something in that moment. Michael and Alicia may have left me behind, but they hadn't taken everything. They thought they had won. But what they didn't know was that Arthur had given me the power to rise. I wasn't going to sit in that house and waste away. No. I was going to Paris. And not as the abandoned grandmother they had cast aside, but as a woman with means, dignity, and a plan. I started small. I booked a first-class flight. I bought a few new clothes. Nothing extravagant yet, but clothes that made me feel confident. And then I did something that changed everything. I hired a private investigator. If Michael and Alicia thought they could enjoy Paris without me, I wanted to know exactly where they were, what they were doing, and when. The grief that once pressed on me like a stone was replaced by determination. I could feel Arthur's hand guiding me, almost whispering, "Joyce, you're not finished yet." But before I go on, let me pause. Because I know some of you watching have been betrayed too. Maybe not by family, maybe not by children, but by people you trusted. By friends, by partners, by those you gave everything to. Let me pray over you right now. May the pain of betrayal not define you. May your broken heart find healing, and may your weary body find rest. I pray that you rise, not in bitterness, but in strength, that your tomorrow holds more hope than your yesterday. And if you are in the autumn years of your life, may you never feel forgotten, for your worth is far greater than those who fail to see it. Hold on, my dear. If I could rise from my chair after being left behind, so can you. Because betrayal may wound us deeply, but it can also awaken a fire we never knew we had. And in my case, that fire was just beginning to burn. Once I knew the truth about Arthur's hidden gift, it felt like a heavy curtain had lifted. The same house that once echoed with emptiness now became a place of preparation. I stopped walking around in the same worn sweaters. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick, and told myself, "Joyce, you are not a victim anymore." I walked into a boutique downtown, something I hadn't done in years, and let the saleswoman drape me in fabrics I never thought I'd own. I bought tailored dresses, comfortable but elegant shoes, and even a scarf that reminded me of the one I had knitted for Lily. Except this one, I didn't stitch with aching hands. It was bought freely, without guilt. For the first time in decades, I gave myself permission to feel good. Next, I booked my flight. Not economy, not middle row. A first-class ticket, direct to Paris. I wanted comfort, but more than that, I wanted to step into that city with my head held high. If Michael and Alicia were wandering through Paris as budget tourists, then I would be stepping into it as someone reborn. But clothes and flights weren't enough. My heart still burned with questions. Where were they staying? What were they doing? Did they even think about me as they explored the city I had saved for? That's when I reached out to a private investigator named Patrick. I told him the truth, though not all of it. I said I believed my family was in Paris, and I wanted to know where they were staying. He was efficient, professional. Within days, he had their location pinned down. They were in a small bed and breakfast, tucked into a quiet neighborhood. Not luxury, not glamorous, just modest. And then, Patrick sent me photos. There was Michael, smiling with Alicia at a cafe. There were the children, holding croissants bigger than their faces. There they were, in front of Notre Dame, laughing, posing for pictures. I stared at those images on my screen for hours. My heart ached because those smiles were supposed to be shared with me. But at the same time, something else stirred in me resolve. They had stolen my dream, but I was about to give them a memory they would never forget. The more photos Patrick sent, the clearer my plan became. They were eating simple meals, hopping from one budget-friendly attraction to another. Every smile, every laugh, only fueled the fire inside me. They thought they had left me behind, but in truth, I was closer than they would ever imagine. I called the travel agency again and booked a suite at one of the finest hotels near the Champs-Élysées. A balcony overlooking the Arc de Triomphe. Fresh flowers in the room every morning, staff who addressed me as Madame Miller. I could almost hear Arthur's chuckle, as if he were saying, "Now that's the way you should travel, Joyce." With each passing day, my sorrow gave way to strategy. I wasn't going to march into Paris screaming at them in the middle of the street. No, I wanted them to feel the weight of their choice. I wanted them to taste the discomfort of knowing they had betrayed me. So I began planning what I called my little reminders. Small, subtle gestures that would unsettle them without ever revealing my face. A bottle of wine delivered to their table, signed from an admirer. A framed replica of the Mona Lisa arriving at their bed and breakfast after their museum visit with a note. "Hope you enjoyed your day." The thought of Michael and Alicia exchanging nervous glances, whispering to each other, filled me with a strange satisfaction. For once, I was the one pulling the strings. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. About standing up from the ashes of betrayal and proving that even in my late 60s, I could rise stronger than before. I didn't feel like a weak old woman anymore. I felt alive, powerful, and ready. Because my family thought Paris would be their victory. But Paris was about to become the stage where I showed them the price of casting me aside. The day my plane touched down in Paris, I felt like a different woman. I didn't arrive tired and cramped in the back of the plane. I stepped out of first class refreshed, a glass of champagne still lingering on my lips. A driver was waiting with my name on a card, and soon I was gliding through the streets in a black car, passing landmarks I had only seen in books. When I opened the door to my hotel suite and stepped onto the balcony, I could see the Arc de Triomphe standing proudly before me. I thought of Michael and Alicia unpacking their bags in their tiny bed and breakfast, and the contrast made me smile. They had stolen my dream, but I was living it in a way they could only imagine. Patrick kept sending me updates. A photo of them eating sandwiches on a park bench. Another of them squinting up at the stained glass in Notre Dame. They looked happy, but I knew it wouldn't last. I began with something small. Patrick told me they were having lunch at a little cafe in Le Marais. I had the concierge call ahead and arrange a delivery, a bottle of fine Bordeaux and a plate of colorful macarons. The waiter set it down at their table with a note from an admirer. I wasn't far. From across the street, I watched as Michael frowned. Alicia looked puzzled, and the children clapped their hands at the sight of the treats. They ate, but the unease was clear. Good. Let the doubt creep in. The next day, after their visit to the Louvre, I had a package waiting at their bed and breakfast. A framed replica of the Mona Lisa with a card that read, "Hope you enjoyed your day. Your biggest fan." That night, Patrick called me. He had overheard them arguing. Michael was on edge, Alicia confused. Both of them convinced someone was following them. I leaned back in my chair, savoring my glass of wine. For once, it wasn't me pacing the floor in worry. It was them. The following days, I made the game more personal. Each morning, a long-stemmed rose was delivered to Alicia, along with an anonymous note. One day, it was a bottle of expensive perfume. Another, a silk scarf. Patrick reported that Michael's jealousy was boiling over. Their whispers turned into raised voices. Their vacation was unraveling thread by thread, and all I had to do was pull lightly at the edges. As I walked along the Seine one evening, watching the water shimmer under the lights, I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. They thought I was weak. They thought I was disposable. But in Paris, I was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. And the lesson was far from over. By the 10th day of their trip, the tension was eating them alive. Patrick told me they barely spoke at breakfast, their arguments spilling into the streets as they walked. Alicia clutched her roses nervously, while Michael's face grew darker by the hour. I knew it was time to end the game. Through Patrick's connections, I arranged for them to receive a special invitation to a private dinner at a charming bistro they had been hoping to try. A single dining room, candlelight, and a promise of a luxurious meal from an anonymous friend. At first they hesitated, but the temptation of free indulgence was too strong. They accepted. I arrived earlier, dressed in one of my new tailored outfits, and settled at a table upstairs where I could see into their private room below. The bistro's manager nodded discreetly, everything ready as planned. My heart beat fast, but not with fear, with a sense of righteous calm. Michael and Alicia entered, dressed nicely but looking worn. They sat stiffly, glancing around as though expecting someone to leap out at them. The children fidgeted, innocent of the storm swirling around their parents. They ate quietly. When dessert arrived, the waiter stepped back, pressed a button on a small remote, and the screen in their dining room flickered to life. The video began. Clips of them walking hand in hand through Paris, smiling at cafes, pointing at monuments, all the moments Patrick had captured over the past week. But instead of joyous music, a jaunty tune played that made the footage feel mocking. Image after image, all their laughter and stolen moments, paraded before their eyes. And then the screen faded to black. For words appeared in white letters, written in a font that mimicked my handwriting. "We'll send you postcards." The very same words they had scrawled in that cruel note. I will never forget the look on their faces. Michael went pale, his jaw slack. Alicia covered her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. They looked around frantically, searching the shadows, whispering to each other in panic. The children were confused, tugging at their sleeves, asking what was happening. I let them squirm for a few moments more before slipping out of my seat upstairs. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. As they stumbled from the restaurant, their eyes darting everywhere, they froze when they saw me. I stepped slowly down the stone steps, calm and composed, my driver holding the door open behind me. "Leaving so soon?" I asked softly. Michael's face drained of color. Alicia's lips trembled. Neither of them spoke. I gave a polite smile. "I hope you enjoyed your meal. It's on me. Just like the trip." Then I slid into the back seat, the door closing gently. As the car pulled away, I raised my hand and waved. "Bon voyage," I said through the window, watching their stunned faces shrink into the distance. For the first time in weeks, I felt a wave of triumph. Not the kind that shouts or rages, but the quiet, undeniable kind that comes when justice has finally been served. They thought Paris would be their victory. Instead, it became the stage for their humiliation. As my car pulled away from that bistro, I thought I would feel nothing but triumph. And for a while I did. I sat back in the leather seat, watching the streets of Paris glide by, and told myself, they will never forget this. They will never treat me as disposable again. But once I returned to my suite, when the door closed behind me and the silence of the room settled in, the feeling shifted. I had won, yes. I had shown them what betrayal costs. Yet the victory felt strangely hollow. Over the next few days, I went through the itinerary I had once planned for all of us. I stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower, but without Leo's squeals of excitement, the view seemed muted. I wandered through the Louvre, but without Lily tugging my hand and asking questions. The paintings felt flat. I sat on a boat along the Seine, the lights shimmering on the water, and thought about how I once dreamed of watching Arthur's face light up at the same sight. It hurt, realizing that I had achieved my dream, but it wasn't the dream I wanted anymore. What I had wanted was togetherness. And what I got was solitude, dressed in luxury. Still, life has a way of surprising you even when you think the story is over. One afternoon, I sat at a small cafe sipping tea when I noticed a woman a little older than me struggling with a map. Her face showed the same kind of lost frustration I had felt many times since arriving. I leaned over and asked, "Are you all right? Do you need some help?" She looked up, startled, then smiled warmly. "A little. I'm supposed to be at my granddaughter's wedding, but the family's busy with preparations, so I'm left to explore on my own." I'm completely turned around. Her name was Helen, from Houston, Texas. Just like me, she had come to Paris with dreams of making memories with family, only to find herself pushed to the sidelines. We started talking. Then we started walking. And before I knew it, hours had passed. We laughed. We shared stories. We carried each other's burdens in the way only strangers turned friends can. That meeting was no accident. It was exactly what I needed. Helen and I spent the next several days together, exploring corners of Paris I might never have discovered on my own. She had a lightness about her, a way of laughing that made even the simplest things, like sharing a pastry on a park bench, feel special. We wandered through hidden gardens, browsed tiny bookstores, and shared dinners that stretched late into the night. For the first time since Arthur's death, I felt like I wasn't alone. Paris stopped being a monument to my betrayal and became a place of new beginnings. With Helen beside me, I realized something powerful. Revenge might satisfy you for a moment, but companionship heals you for a lifetime. When the time came to fly back to Boston, Helen and I promised we would stay in touch. And we did. Even now, we call each other every week, two women who found each other in the middle of disappointment and turned it into something beautiful. Back home, my house didn't feel as empty as before. I redecorated, filled it with fresh colors and life, and began inviting friends over more often. I wasn't waiting for Michael's calls anymore. I wasn't holding my breath for Alicia to stop by. I had built something new, on my own terms. Months later, a letter from Michael arrived. It was short, filled with apologies, regret, and confessions. He said the trip had torn his marriage apart. He admitted it was a mistake, that their vacation was a disaster, that they had lost more than they had gained. I read it once, then set it aside. I didn't need to respond. My silence was enough. My life had moved forward, and I was no longer bound to their choices. I had learned something in Paris. The sweetest revenge is not in watching others suffer. It's in building a life so full of joy, strength, and new beginnings that their betrayal no longer holds power over you. So, if you are listening right now, holding on to the sting of being wronged, let me leave you with this. Don't let betrayal define you. Let it free you. Let it push you into creating a life that shines so brightly that no shadow from the past can dim it. My story began with heartbreak, but it didn't end there. I was left behind, abandoned by those I trusted most. But through that pain I found a new strength, new friendships, and a new chapter of my life. Paris didn't give me the memories I thought I would have, but it gave me something even more precious. The reminder that my worth is not defined by who leaves me, but by how I choose to rise after they're gone. Before we part, let me offer you a prayer from my heart. To every grandmother, every mother, every soul watching this, may your days be filled with peace even when storms come. If you carry loneliness, may you be comforted. If you carry betrayal, may you be healed. And if you carry dreams, no matter your age, may you see them come alive in your lifetime. Your story is not over, and your value is not measured by those who fail to see it. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal that turned into a blessing? Share your story in the comments, because your voice may give someone else the courage to stand tall. And if my story touched you today, please subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who might need a little hope. This community isn't just about stories, it's about family. And I want you to be a part of mine. Tell me where you're watching from, so I can lift your name in my prayers. Whether you're in Boston like me, or on the other side of the world, I'll be thinking of you tonight. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. Until next time, remember, betrayal can break you, but it can also build you. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply living well.